Justine McGrath from ProActive Coaching is an emotional intelligence expert. She works with very senior managers and business leaders. I wanted to get an insight from her into how they are coping with COVID-19. I deal with senior managers all the time. Let me start with that. Senior managers in a large company, how much do they realize that they actually need emotional intelligence? Probably nowadays more than ever before.
I think more of them are beginning to realize it. What has happened in the current situation that they're in is that a lot of people have had more time to reflect on this. And two of the major traits of emotional intelligence are adaptability and resilience. And I think senior managers have realized, first of all, it's absolutely essential in these times to be adaptable. There are a lot of people having to adapt their businesses. But also resilience. You have to be able to bounce back from the shock. Not only now do they have to manage a whole staff who are working remotely, they have to manage themselves. And with people now working from home, they have to deal with all of the things that are going on at home as well as the workplace. So what I've actually found is the first thing that they've had to do is they've had to adapt to how do I communicate with my staff on Zoom or on whatever online platform that they're using. What is the best way that I can communicate better with my staff? The second thing is that there has to be boundaries. And one of the things that I found that senior managers and leaders are learning very quickly is that you can't expect your employees to be working just because they're at home. You know, people are sending emails 10, 11 o'clock at night and thinking, you know, this is all fine. When you're in the workplace, you have the water filter moments, you know, the coffee moments. You all have the little bit of chit chat. And what I found from senior managers and leaders is they're saying, my staff are missing that. They're missing the social aspect of it. So senior managers and leaders have started to do things like, let's have a little quiz night, or before the call begins, the business call of the day begins, why don't we have, you know, 5 minutes of what are you all doing? What have you been watching on Netflix? Just that little bit of social interaction beforehand. And one thing I've been suggesting to them is before you start any meeting online with your employees, ask them how they are. By giving that little bit of time to your employees, you're making them feel more valued, but also they feel more connected. So it's actually about the connection. How do you connect with your employees? How do you reach out? Now, for the manager that struggles with that, I would say, okay, just have a go, practice. If it feels unnatural or uncomfortable, start with something you do feel comfortable talking about. And it doesn't have to be a big long conversation. It can just be a couple of minutes at the start of the call.
And what about their time management? Because you sort of touched on it with emails coming in late at night or early in the morning.
I think what has happened is because they're in the workplace and they're thinking differently. So they're thinking, well, sure, I know Joe's at home and sure he's doing nothing but sitting watching the television. Sure, it doesn't matter. He's online. Everyone knows we're so connected now online that I can ping him an email and sure, it might come through on his phone and he might see it. But then at 9 o'clock the next morning, when Joe hasn't responded to that email, the manager is saying, well, I sent you an email last night. Why didn't you reply to it? And that's where they have to understand that's not office hours. The employee has the right to say, I'm setting some boundaries here. I'll reply to your email tomorrow, but I'm not going to reply to it at 10, 11 p.m. at night. And for managers and leaders to be okay with that, to say, okay, that's outside of working hours. One of the things that's changed with us all being at home is that they have this expectation that, sure, what else are you doing? People are working much more.
When I'm at home, this is the part of at home when I'm at work, and this is the part of at home when I'm at home. Or are they coping well? And I suppose what kind of personality type copes best with this level of change?
The personality type that does cope best with this level of change is the person or the leader or manager who has some experience of this, who's done some work on themselves, who understands that I've got to engage now my leadership traits of setting boundaries. You know, they may have a partner or a wife or husband who's saying, now hang on a minute, your working day is done now. This is family times. On the reverse side, I have heard of a lot of leaders and managers who have come to me saying, look, I'm finding this really difficult. I'm stuck at my desk. I can't seem to break away because I'm just being emails are flowing in and I've so much work to do that I'm finding it hard to balance. It's very much down to the individual personality, but leaders and managers, I think, are becoming better at setting boundaries. At the very beginning, what I saw was a lot of anxiety. But once that settled down, then, as you say, there were the leaders and managers who thought, this is great, I'm thriving here, I've got my family, I can adapt. Now, those are the people who would be very high in the trait of adaptability. They would say, as long as I've got the right setup, I'm able to adapt. It may not be perfect, but I'm going to make the most of this situation. You have the leaders and managers who weren't coping so well. Quite often, those are leaders and managers who like to micromanage. They're less able to micromanage from a distance and through a Zoom screen. So they are the leaders and managers who, adapting has been much more difficult for them because they can't micromanage, and they've had to accept that they're going to have to change I've seen a lot of leaders having to change their leadership style. Aside from adaptability and resilience, I think motivation is becoming an issue now because they've managed to survive this. They're getting through it. They're saying, right, okay, we're getting through this. But now suddenly we're faced with a whole new set of decisions, this transitionary period where we all have to think about going back to work, because it's like, I've just got through this. Now I've got to make all these new decisions. Go right back to basics. Let's just start with one decision. What is the first decision that you need to make? Simplify it. So the leaders and managers who are coping the best are those who are not looking at it as one big, huge transition, that everything has to be decided today, everything has to be resolved today. Really look after yourself so that you have the capability. I'm advocating self-care. You've got to take some time out. You've got to look after yourself.
That it's a leader's job to give hope. Whether they can see that hope or not themselves. What kind of additional skills, I suppose, do they need to draw on to keep that level of hope among employees while they themselves are probably feeling quite hopeless or helpless, trying to decide what the next move is?
It has to start with them. And I think it's basically down to positive attitude. They can't give hope unless they're feeling it themselves. In order to feel it themselves, they have to build strength within themselves. So they have to sit down. So the traits that you'd be looking at is you'd be saying, okay, first of all, it starts with the positive attitude. The positive attitude can only come when you are able to use your resilience to say, okay, we need some bounce back. There's a shock here. We have to be able to bounce back. But in order to have that resilience, it does start with the leader and the manager themselves. They've got to do the self-care piece. You've got to find it within you. So let's look at the positives. Let's try and find some positives out of this. They get overwhelmed with too much information. It's about not looking at everything at once. You really have to, it's almost like drawing a new boundary and saying you've got to put your boundaries and tolerations in place. And the self-care piece is essential. So, simple things like meditating. I've actually found the leaders and managers who are doing best are the ones who have that little bit of knowledge about how am I going to keep my head in the right place here?
I would imagine the team-focused employees are finding it very difficult at the moment, whereas the task-focused ones can get up and say, I need to get this job done by 5 o'clock this evening, and then I've checked out and I'm doing something else.
And I think how the team players are coping is they're gaining their energy from the team online. A more introverted person is quite happy to just get up and say, right, I've got X number of tasks to do today. Quite happy to sit at my laptop and get them done, and they don't need so much. So if I see empathy in a great leader, I see a leader who wants to take the time to understand what's going on with his employees. If an employee is not being effective, empathy comes in, and the traits of a good leader with empathy, I'd be looking for people that ask why. So why is Joe not working as well as I normally work at the minute? What's going on there? There's something not quite right.
Justine McGrath, thank you so much for sharing those insights. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you so much, Ellen. So did I. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I really appreciate it. Thanks a million.
Justine identified 4 key skills for leaders: communication, time management, emotional intelligence, and self-care. She spoke about communication and the need for leaders to show empathy with their employees. The water cooler moments, she said, are important. Time management at home is challenging. She advised taking pieces in small chunks to cope with them. First 3 items, get them off the hit list, then look at the next few. It makes it much more manageable and keeps things in perspective, she suggested. On emotional intelligence, the 3 key skills she came back to time and time again were adaptability, resilience, and self-motivation. And finally, she spoke about self-care and said that the best leaders that she works with practice mindfulness and meditation. They take that 30 minutes each day to clear their mind and are better leaders because of it. Essential online training solutions for communications professionals. The PR Training Academy.